After hearing that I wanted to fit a router in the top of my workbench, those nice people at Trend have sent me a router insert plate to be able to turn my workbench into a router table, and they've also sent me a T14 top of the range, hot off the press, brand new router as well for me to try out. So today I'm going to be installing this and I'm going to be reviewing this. Run the intro. This Trend insert plate is made out of metal alloy and is around about 230 by 300 or 9 by 12 inches. It's just over 6mm thick and it's designed for the Trend routers, although it will accept other routers, and there's instructions on the back on how to drill holes in base plates or other routers to make them fit as well. But I'm sort of expecting it to be fairly straightforward to be fitting the new Trend router to this insert plate. Now, this is going to go in the top of my workbench, actually recessed, so it's going to be absolutely flat with the top of my workbench. And with the kit comes a holding down inserts and leveling screws and all the bits and pieces you need, not only to fix it, but to make it absolutely level with the top of your workbench, which is really important because obviously as you're sliding wood across this base plate, you don't want any lips either up or down to get in the way. So you really do need that fine adjustment as well. Now, as for the T14, this is the latest full-size half-inch router from Trend and has just come onto the market. It's got an 80mm plunge capacity and an 86mm maximum bit capacity. It can run anywhere between 9,000 and 22,000 RPM. And also comes with the quick razor fine height adjustment, which is a knob that you can use on the top of the router table for adjustment rather than trying to get underneath. Now, this one also conforms to the latest regulations on Nvr switches. So essentially it's got its own built-in Nvr switch for additional safety. However, a built-in Nvr switch on a router that's potentially hung underneath the workbench can be pretty awkward to use because you can't just control it by turning the power on and off. You've essentially got to reset the switch, which means that every time you want to turn it on, you've got to reach up and find the switch and reset it. Now, because of that, Trend have actually included in this what they call a table switch. And that's a length of cable that's plugged into the router that goes to a remote switch that you fit either on the top or the side of your workbench, which means you can actually still remotely control it rather than reaching up and trying to find that switch. So I'm interested, I've not seen that before, I'm interested to see how that works and what that looks like. Anyway, I think we need to firstly install this insert plate, and that means I need to route out around the perimeter on my workbench a certain amount before cutting a hole. So to route that out, I need to find my template profiling bit, which I know I've got somewhere, and then get on and do lots of routing. After a long but successful search to find my template cutter, I clear out the storage under my workbench so I can see the structure of the top of the bench I built many months ago, and luckily the gap between the main supports is wider than the insert plate, so no alterations needed today. I marked out the position of it on the top, near the centre of the bench, midway between the two supports. This insert plate comes with all the fixings you need to install it, plus some countersink screws to connect it to any router. It also comes with 7 magnets that are used as a base for each of the adjustment screws to bear on. As soon as I positioned the plate on my markings, I felt that it was in totally the wrong place, being in the middle of the workbench. So I changed my mind and shifted it closer to one end of the bench, but still between 2 supports, which just felt nicer. Here I'm using some 1/2-inch ply offcuts to create an accurate perimeter to the plate that I can then remove and route out the inside, using them as a template. Although I have lots of timber offcuts, I chose these as they're wide enough to support the router base and they're in good condition with a clean straight edge. The template cutter will mirror whatever edge you're running along, so you do need something smooth and straight if you want a tight fit. Following the instructions, I'm setting the depth of cut to 8mm, plus the thickness of ply that the router base will be sitting on, which, although I know is 12mm, I use a scrap of ply in the depth guide to allow for this, and then use my digital depth gauge to set an additional plunge of 8mm. Initially, I plunge only a couple of millimeters, and I find that when I'm routing a channel of this sort of depth, it doesn't really matter which direction you go in, as it's easy to stay tight up against the ply guide. I take 3 passes in all to get to full depth, and as I'm a little bit deeper now into the ply, my last pass I go right to left just to make sure I'm still tight up against the template. The corners are also routed out where the holding down bolts go, and then I can cut out the middle. Right, the moment of truth. Let's see if this fits, shall I? I'm lucky here that the template cutter I use is around the same radius as the corners on the insert plate, so I've ended up with a really nice tight fit. Lovely. I drill some 5mm deep holes for the magnets to fit in. The levelling screws actually bear down on these, so they don't just push into wood. I fit the insert nuts for the holding down screws, and then I can put back the plate and level it. I found as these grub screws are pushing against the firm foundation of the magnets, it's easy to get a fine adjustment with them. The T14 comes in quite a monster sized box, which gives you a clue of things to come. There's all the usual attachments for dust extraction and guides, which I'm not going to be using today. So they all go to one side for now, and before I do anything else, I take the opportunity to read the user manual. So just getting this out of the box and having a play with it and a read of the instructions as well. My first impressions are it's a bit of a beast of a machine, and you can see why it's got 80mm of travel, because it's such a chunky piece of kit, but really quite nice as well. It's definitely a premium machine. One little feature I do like is on the left hand here, where you've got this quick lock off button. So whenever you're in the right position, just a quick press of this means that the machine is locked to level. Obviously you use your thumb to disengage that. But when you do press that button, there is absolutely no play at all. Wherever it is in the travel, as soon as that button's pressed, it isn't moving up and down at all. It's absolutely fixed solid. So that can be really useful when you're just into the right position and at the right depth and you just want to fix it quickly. On the right hand is the on and off button, and there's a sort of satisfying click to on and off. There's also a hold button as well, so you can press the on and hold it. It's on full time until you just release it with your right finger. Looking at the other side, the front or the back, if you want to call it that, the depth adjustment is on a rotary knob with a friction adjustment here as well. And these are obviously in 5 millimeter gradients up and down. The fine adjustment is a little bit fiddly, especially if this is all the way down. The fine adjustment I find quite difficult to get to. It's possible, it's just a little bit tricky, that's all. And for your speed, if I just set it here, obviously use 9,000 to 22,000 RPM as well. So very much a workshop tool. It's quite a monster, but quite nice to hold as well. It is ergonomically quite satisfying to hold. As I said to you, because of the regulations on the electrical changes, if we just plug this in and make sure that my Nvr switch is on the bench, obviously it will start and I can hold it there quite easily. So if I turn this off, obviously the power is off and it's going to stop like any other machine. But because of the no voltage release type mechanism in here, if I turn this back on again, then although the light comes on, the power doesn't start until I release this trigger and start it again. So because of this Nvr type switch it's got in here, as I said earlier, if you try to mount this underneath your bench, then forever you'll be trying to get to this switch. But this is where this extra cable and remote switch comes in as well. And that fits quite nicely somewhere that's a little bit hidden on this left-hand grip actually. So if I just press this little hidden button, the handle pops up and reveals a connection here that this fits into, if I can get it round the right way, which I think is, it's a little bit fiddly. But you're not going to be doing this all the time. It just winds into there like that. And now I can control it with this remote switch. So it's quite nice being able to control it remotely from a switch like this with a cable that's maybe 1 metre or 1.2 metres long. It's got 4 fixings. I don't think they give you the fixings, but it just can take standard screws and just mount that to the side of your workbench or somewhere convenient. And it not only acts as an on-off switch, obviously it's a sort of emergency stop as well. So I really like that, and that's a really quite nice feature. So I think what I'm going to do is get this mounted to the underside of this plate, and let's see if we can do some routing. I screw the insert plate to the base of the router, and as expected all the holes line up, although there's additional holes for other makes of routers that I suppose may or may not fit depending on your make. I also insert a round over bit which I tighten with the most substantial spanner I've ever seen supplied with a router. I must say the one thing it has got is a decent length of cable for sure. Within a couple of minutes it's all back in place and I can replace the centre rings before raising the cutter. I plug in the table switch lead and then mount the switch somewhere easy to reach on my bench. Routing a small item like this is far easier holding the item than the router. But you really got to make sure you keep your fingers well away from the cutter. This will take them off in a blink of an eye. Here I'm trying to keep my hands either in front of the cutter or away from it, or even using a push stick just for that last couple of inches. And remember, safety is your own responsibility. So if you're a novice in routing, keep your fingers and hands well away from these sharp bits. One thing I will have to make now for this setup is a fence, which will enable me to route with cutters that don't use bearings, and will allow me to also incorporate some dust collection as well. So I must say, I really, really like now having a router fitted to my workbench. I must say, it is so convenient to be able to run the timber through and also not have another workbench. I don't want another router table in here. I want it on this, which means I can work around this and do whatever I want to on the bench. And when I do want it, I just bring it up and use it. And I must say, the convenience of having the adjustment up the top. So not only do I not have to bend down and do anything, but I can actually adjust it tenths of a millimetre or 50ths of a millimetre. So when you're getting a round over like this, just to lose that little edge where you haven't quite adjusted it, should just take half a turn and you're there. And that is really convenient and really handy. I think I'm going to have to do some more router projects coming up. I do like this. This is really very nice. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on our channel and please subscribe. And please go and check out our Patreon page. The membership is growing rapidly and there's an extra video every Saturday just for the Patreons as well. So please go and check us out over there and support the channel. So, till next week, I'm going to have a play with my router lift. See you then. Woo!